Hello and welcome to the August 25th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. This is Mike Hogan here with, via Skype in Saratoga, Mr. Peter Thomas Fornatel. Welcome, Pete.
Welcome to you, sir. You know, you got a call on local Saratoga radio the other day.
Uh-oh.
One of our loyal listeners, my buddy Blake from the Paddock Bar, has a show here on WSPN, the Skidmore College station, where I pull shifts from time to time myself.
I've listened to you both, actually. I've listened to you
that's right.
last summer when you sat in.
Exactly. Well, he, inspired by your Stevie Wonder story on the last podcast we did together, spun a set of Stevie in his show last Wednesday, and credited you specifically for the concept. So I thought that was cool.
I love it. Maybe is it archived? I'd love to check it out.
That's a great question. I'll find out and we'll tweet the link if it is.
Okay.
You know, that it's always a good excuse to listen to some Stevie Wonder. That's for sure.
Absolutely, and I'll even maybe turn up the speakers and annoy the folks around me in the office.
Only when the part with your name comes up. Let them know. Not only are people around the Paddock Bar constantly asking, when's Mike Hogan coming up? I really want to meet Mike Hogan. But now they're talking about you on the radio as well. You're a local hero.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's nice to hear.
But man, what a weekend up here this was. Another perfect weather, despite some forecasted rain on Friday that didn't show up really. But we just had an amazing weekend of racing featuring some fantastic performances. It was really just another really fun weekend to be up in Saratoga. Got to meet some fans of the show, just hanging around the track. It was fun. You know, I go through these phases where sometimes I'll be super serious working gambling at the track. The last couple of days I was both there with people who haven't been to the track much and played a little bit the role of tour guide amidst my own personal degeneracy. But that's always fun too, to see that plant through new players' eyes and see how amazed they can be by some of the wonderful aspects up there at Saratoga.
That's great. I love it. I love you being the tour guide and getting some other folks hooked on the sport. Yeah, it's been amazing, and last weekend was some incredible races. This weekend, it's going to be just insane. Right?
I'm batting down the hatches already.
That's part of the big news that came down since we last spoke, of course, was the big horse is going to be running on Saturday.
It's amazing, and I've never been so happy to be wrong. And I think it was one of these things where a lot of coin flips needed to go the right way. I still believe in his heart. I think Baffert probably has a gigantic pit in his stomach this week, because I think he's a little bit afraid about coming here, but just everything the horse has done has screamed that the horse wants to come here. And at the end of the day, Baffert respects that, and he respects his owner's clear wishes to come here. So I'm very glad to have, despite publicly questioning Mr. Zayat on Twitter and getting chided by him, that he ended up being right. I'm not the type of person, and actually this type of person makes you crazy. And you meet them at the racetrack, right? They're the type of person who can never just say, I was wrong, It'd be like, oh, but this and this and this. Right. No. You can just say you're wrong. In fact, that, I think, is the better way to fly. And happy to say I was wrong. Welcome to Saratoga, American Pharaoh. I can't wait to see this. I hope he demolishes the field. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. Well, and, I think it's been a little overstated, Baffert's record at Saratoga. It's not like he can't win there. It's not like he doesn't win there.
He just doesn't like it. He wins. He just doesn't like it. He believes whatever it is that he believes about this track. And he hasn't had a ton of success in recent years. I mean, maybe some of that has to do with horses that were training more on poly, and then the differences between that and dirt and this and that. I mean, there was a time where I felt like his runners coming here was a big plus. He has won the race before with, unfortunately, I'm in the wrong room. You can't see the picture hanging on the wall over my shoulder, but Point Given, of course, had success up here. This is a special horse. I think he brings his racetrack with him. He's shown even when the racetrack isn't to his specific liking, like Churchill Downs on Derby Day, that he can still get the job done and then come back and turn in 2 more Tour de Force performances over the course of the next 5 weeks. This is a special horse, and I think he can handle it. I understand why Baffert was scared about it. I understand why many horsemen are a little bit puzzled by the decision, just in terms of how the fact that they could have shipped one fewer time and maybe had an easier road with more guaranteed money going the Pennsylvania Derby route. But I think this is just a case of believing in the horse and asking the horse to do something extraordinary that I believe he's capable of. And that might be a segue into one of the other things we want to talk about on the podcast today, if you catch my drift, talking about horses doing things that many trainers wouldn't do that end up being extraordinary.
I think that's a fantastic segue, and it also can segue into somewhere where I can publicly say I was wrong. It ties very nicely into that side of the conversation. Why don't you start? Of course, we're talking about Beholder, and boy, she couldn't have been more impressive in winning the Pacific Classic against boys. Buyer speed figure came back a 114.
Whoa, I didn't see that. That's amazing.
Yes, everything about that performance, it's just jaw-dropping. And, the other thing I'll note, less than a fifth off the track record, 10 furlongs.
I mean, a brand new track. Is that counting all-time dirt, or is that just counting this meet, or what is that? What does that track record mean?
I think that is counting all Del Mar main track. So old dirt, poly, new dirt. Because obviously there probably haven't been many 10 furlong on the new dirt, but yeah.
Precisely. But still, it visually had the look of that kind of 115 performance. But, sometimes the reason we have speed figures is because the looks don't always match up to that. But it's not shocking that the number would come back that strong. It's one of those performances I wish I had something unique to say about it. I feel like every word I'm going to say about it has already been said by somebody else, starting with, wow, that was awesome. That was unbelievable. How great to see this horse, who had been spoken about by connections in terms like she was capable of that. Talk of Gary Stevens saying the best horse he's ridden. The guy sat on a few good horses. When you hear them say that at first, you almost wonder if there's not some sort of recency bias or something, or if he really objectively believed that. I'll tell you what, after watching that performance, you can objectively believe it. She laid waste to that field.
Yes.
And I just think that's a performance we're going to be watching for years and years and years. And the other point that I wanted to make about it, that I'm sure has been made elsewhere, and it sort of gets back to what we were just talking about with American Pharaoh, is I love connections that take chances. Now, not wantonly taking chances and shots and running horses where they don't belong. I mean, whatever. I guess you're right. If you want to take a shot, that's fine. I do think sometimes by taking those type of shots, particularly during a horse's early development, early on in the Triple Crown Trail, you can take a horse who would have been a good horse and make them a bad horse, or make them a horse who never can realize their potential. But when you're dealing with a fully formed animal, such as a finally keeping all the physicality right Beholder, or talking about a horse like American Pharaoh, take chances. Even if it doesn't work out, it's okay to lose. When you look back at great horses in history, and Mike, you made this joke, I think, when we talked about this before on the podcast, about Secretariat. It's not like people say, oh, yeah, Secretariat, he would have been one of the greats, except for that day he lost to Onion. That's right. That's not the way history looks at things. History looks back at the great accomplishments, and when you can take a look at last night, and this will be previewing something later in the show. I don't think we're ready to move on from Beholder just yet, but rewatching all the races in the 3-year-old campaign of Rachel Alexandra, I mean, you could argue that one either way. You could say maybe part of the reason she didn't train on at 4 was all the shots they took at 3, but you know what? The legacy of what she did as a 3-year-old, that lasts forever. And it was special. And, she happened to not lose. But even if she'd lost one of those races, I don't think you'd be saying, oh, Rachel would have been great, but for XYZ. So kudos to Connections, Dick Mandela, Spendthrift. They took a shot, and it ended up going straight through the hoop. It was a beautiful thing to watch out there at Del Mar on Saturday night.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. Nobody talks about the shots Michael Jordan missed. Nobody talks about the shots Wayne Gretzky missed. Nobody talks about the strikeouts that Babe Ruth had. There's nothing at all wrong with taking a shot and losing. And many people, I think, feel Zenyatta's best race was the one race she lost. So
I agree. But I want to talk about Zenyatta for a second, actually, in context of this conversation, because regular listeners will know that we've talked before on the podcast about greatness, and our co-host Matt, who I guess we'll be hearing back from in a couple of weeks, which will be great. But he's made the point that and I don't feel this way, but he is hesitant to call her. I don't know what he said exactly, but it boiled down to he was hesitant to call her an all-time great. And I have to say, while I do consider her an all-time great, I take the point that the way she was campaigned sort of allows a little bit of a window for Matt, and I wish we had him on the show to be talking about this now. We'll put a pin in it and talk about it again in September.
We'll have plenty of opportunities, yeah.
But the point is, if she'd been campaigned more aggressively, if she had come to that personal ensign during Rachel's 4-year-old year and demolished that field by about 15 lengths, which she would have done if they'd been a little more aggressive. I'm not criticizing exactly, because how can you criticize when the horse never loses, right? But I'm just saying I would have taken a loss or two for another great moment or two, rather than just beating up on the same group of horses that I do think allows a historical perspective to question her standing in the all-time pantheon of horses, where I believe she had the talent to belong, and I still believe her race record was enough to say she belongs in that. But anyway, that's sort of one of these things we'll be talking about for many years.
I agree. Let's get back to the Pacific Classic. I thought Bayern might have an opportunity where he would be low in speed. Of course, again, he gets into a speed duel, sets ridiculous fractions. I'm still. I will say two things about Bayern.
You're just trolling me now, right? You're just trolling me.
No.
Folks know how I feel about this.
Well, we do. I think he was vastly overbet at 7-2. I wanted at least 9-2, and when we talked, I thought I might even get as high as 6-1. I did not think he would be the second choice. I thought he was live partly because probably every trainer, I thought everyone in the world was thinking Bayern is not the same horse he was in 2014. And so no one was going to go and slit their own horse's throat because they figured he would back up anyway. Yet still, Tyler Bays on Midnight Storm decides to go and slit his throat. And
he was very rank, I think. I don't think there was a lot of volition there. I think it was a horse taking off, don't you think?
Perhaps. Either way, they canceled each other out. And if in a scenario where Bayern does get overlooked going forward, he could be potentially worth a bet down the road if he gets a better pace setup. That's all I will say.
You think we're going to see him again? I mean, at this point, I just, he doesn't want to go short, he wants to go long. Now he's gone long twice. I mean, I didn't really feel like he had an excuse to back. This time I do take the point that there was more pace pressure than you would have maybe imagined. But, I mean, what do you do with him if you're the
What do you do? I don't know. It's a good question. They might cut back. I don't know. I still think he's better carrying his speed out of ground. But, when you go 22-1, 45-2, 109-4, going 10 furlongs, that's really tough to he really gave up the ghost. He came home in just under 28 seconds. That's not the kind of way to win races going long.
No, I think it's probably time to just admit that he has shown some brilliance in his career. He's also gotten some fortunate things happen to him in his career. He's going to have a great looking page in the catalog based on wins from sprints all the way to the Classic. It's probably time to move on. I don't think he's doing anything but tarnishing what he's accomplished on the racetrack at this point. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I know what you're saying just as a handicapper. Any horse who's shown that he owns that type of speed and ability under favorable conditions to carry it, as from a handicapper's point of view, if you were to ever get a big price on that horse against a sub-tier group, then sure. I mean, why not? It's all about getting value, right? But I just, from a connections point of view, I'm not sure we're going to get to see that. And I think we can all agree this horse could have gotten his ideal trip. Everything could have gone exactly his way. And I still think Beholder comes and punches him in the mouth in the stretch. Agree or disagree?
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, that's where I say I was wrong, because I underestimated Beholder. You know, and you look at it from the buyer figure standpoint, it didn't look like she had that kind of performance in her. You know, if she's, you know, running it with Warren's Veneta and Yahil, this was a different league. Whether or not you thought horses like Catch a Flight and Opportunity and even the Shipper Red Vine were some of the best older males in the country, you'd have to admit that they're certainly better than the competition she was running against. And at the first time going 10 furlongs, there were a lot of questions that I had about whether or not she was a legitimate favorite, especially when she opened at even money or whatever it was. Granted, she floated up to 2-1, but boy, after the race, she completely proved me wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it was a mistake not to bet on her. You know, I think you probably did the right thing in not betting on her. That for me was a race that was more a race to watch and enjoy. I wouldn't have wanted to spend a ton of money attacking her in the pools, but I mean, yeah, she was. I didn't bet the race. I just sat and watched and was able to enjoy the performance for what it was. But you know, as we say many times in the podcast, speed figures, they're a tool. They're not the only way to look at races. And this was a case going in where I wasn't interested in betting against her particularly. If all you were looking at was speed figures, you had to bet against her. And that made it very hard for me to want to take that short number. But, you know, this may be the kind of performance that in a way shows why you have to start to take a little bit of more holistic approach, and why you need to believe in things like class, and you need to believe at least a little bit in things like just horsemanship. And when you have people like Stevens and Mandela saying the things they were saying about the horse, you couldn't see on paper that she had this type of performance in her, I don't believe. But I think if you looked at the whole picture of the race, it's not, I mean, it was a surprising result in that it wasn't a likely result, and it was awesome, but it's also not completely out of cloud cuckoo land or something. There is a logic to it.
Right. This was not bailout Bobby doing this. You know, this was Beholder. So so two questions for you.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to play the role, and I'm sure if our co-host Matt Bernier were on, he would be doing this very thing. Let's flash forward. I think it's 68 days or something like that between now and the Breeders' Cup Classic. Let's say American Pharoah runs the table. Beholder has a prep maybe in her between now and then, and the two of them face up along with horses like Tonalist and Honor Code, and you know, who knows what kind of field we're getting. All things being equal, who wins?
Oh, that's such a great and difficult question, of course. First of all, from your mouth to God's ears, that we have such a scenario, right?
Right.
I think, you know, my gut reaction, the first thing that comes to mind is that I feel like American Pharoah. I feel like, you know, under the circumstances you described, where he wins one or two more races heading into such a showdown, I mean, I don't see betting against him very heavily in the Breeders' Cup Classic in terms of who the most likely winner would be, if that makes sense. I'm kind of equivocating a little. But, of course, if he's 1-9 and you have all those other killers at great prices, I mean, you're going to mess around. You're going to do some other things. But in terms of who I make the most likely winner of the race, I think it's got to be him. I just think he has shown such an ability to handle different types of scenarios at this point and prevail without turning a hair, that as awesome as Beholder's Pack Classic win was, and I'm not saying she wouldn't be dangerous in the race, but you figure she's still going to have a lot of hype and money and fan club attached to her as he obviously will to him. But I don't know. The gut says go with the Triple Crown winner there. What do you think about that question?
Similar. I think he's probably going to be your legitimate favorite. I think horses, if you're looking to bet against him, first time facing older horses probably. I'm assuming that will be the first time facing older horses. It's just going to provide value on anybody else that you like. A horse like Honor Code in another year would be a short price favorite, and he might be third, even fourth choice potentially. But I think you're right. I mean, what we've seen from American Pharoah is a horse that he can run on any type of racetrack. He can run on any type of pace scenario. He continually proves that he can step up and just demolish whatever the competition throws at him. The one question, and I've got Beholder's PPs in front of me, she's 14 for 19 lifetime, 12 for 12 in routes in Southern California. Other races, the 2 times she's shipped, she's
Great
lost
point.
both times. So that would be a concern.
She gets a little nutty on the road too.
Yeah.
It's not like that's a coincidence. She
Right.
doesn't ship well, and I wasn't even thinking of that, but yeah, that would be a reason to be against her in a spot like that. And maybe it's a reason why they don't get that ambitious at the end of the day, and they say, you know what, we had our grade 1 against males. Let's go run in the distaff. What are they saying? I didn't really read what the plans are for Beholder from here.
I don't know. I would assume, based on that performance, that they're thinking Breeders' Cup Classic. I don't know. Because to me, that's the only reason why you run in the Pacific Classic. It's the same distance. It's against males. And the way she won that gave no doubt that she can compete.
But the California horses in that race are not the same quality as the horses we were just talking about. That's the only thing. And I think they might have seen it. I mean, I don't know. I could argue it either way. I mean, you're making an excellent point, no doubt. But I could also see it as, you know what, this was our free roll to show we can do this. But since we've had problems shipping in the past, maybe we take it easy on her from here and just win out the year. And I mean, they can't win Horse of the Year. So, not that that's the monetary end all be all or anything, but I don't know. I wouldn't be, my gut sort of tells me they might back off a little, showing that she has that in her, but I could also see them getting ambitious based on the quality of the win. But I do think that's an important point, that wasn't against Honor Code and Tonalist, it was against, Red Vine.
Right. He was a good horse, and I think he ran the second best race. I think he ran the second best race.
He ran all right.
He tried to make the same move Beholder made, and he basically got stopped by Bayern and Midnight Storm when they were backing up, and she just went around. And by that point, she was gone. I think a horse like Catch a Fight ran well too, but I think he was running on for second. Red Vine is the one that I would take of anybody other than Beholder out of the race.
I think that's absolutely fair. I just think it's also fair to speculate that there's a quality difference between the best of the East and the best of the West this year. That's just, again, my sort of gut opinion.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. All right. We should move on and touch on the other races real quick over the weekend before we get to the action yesterday, which I know we want to take a few minutes to talk about. The Monmouth Oaks was won by Delightful Joy for Chad Brown, 89 buyer. I don't have a whole lot to say there. I don't know if we saw any superstars. It was a nice win, but
very well picked spot. Very well picked
Yes.
spot by Connections. Don't need to go to the Alabama and deal with that salty bunch. Go down there, win a nice race. That's incredible for the catalog page, and it was a nice win. The horse ran well. It was a pretty easy win in the end. But I agree. I don't have a ton to add. I just thought it was an example of Connections. There's a good example of where you don't take a shot. You know what I mean? You don't have to think about Alabama. You win your grade 3. You're doing your horse a favor, and you're living to maybe take your shot another day. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. But going back to Del Mar, we had the Del Mar Handicap, the race, right before the Pacific Classic. Won by Big John B, 98 buyer. He looked good in doing it. You know, I think the scratch of Finnegan's Wake maybe changed the race a little bit. He was the one I liked in that spot. But, you know, Big John B ran well. I think he's a good horse. He's proven he can win on dirt. He's proven he can win on turf. And, you know, we'll see where he goes from there. But I don't know if I saw a Breeders' Cup turf performance there. I don't know. What was your take?
That wouldn't be my first idea either. To be honest with you, I didn't even see that race. Okay. I was so caught up in getting ready for Beholder and transitioning between Saratoga and Del Mar, but I did, you know, certainly the Finnegan's Wake scratch took a little bit of the starch out of that field. But, you know, that horse is always meant to be a good horse, so it's not a surprise. I think, again, just a good job of getting it done. You know, the horse was pretty short, right?
Yeah, I think he was about 2-1, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
If not the favorite, he was maybe the second choice. And look, Phil D'Amato is basically turning into the Southern California version of Chad Brown. You know, anything going.
He wins and wins.
Yeah, anything going along on the turf, you got to bet him. All right, let's go back to Saratoga. You touched on the Alabama. Embellish the Lace goes wire to wire. 96 buyer for her. I printed out the incremental splits because this is the way you win a race on the front end, going 10 furlongs. 24 flat, 24-1, 24-2, 24-2, 24-3. That's what she did.
Yeah, if you're a horse with stamina, I agree. I mean, I think what people don't realize is I don't think there's necessarily one template for how a front runner should run. I think there are horses who have maybe a shorter burst of speed and not true stamina who need to go slow early so that they can get home when they're going a route of ground like 10 furlongs. There are other horses that truly want to run long who don't maybe have as much of a burst of speed for 3/8, who they need to do exactly what you said, Mike, and they need to get that field on the stretch by not going too fast or too slow, by just sort of running evenly and optimally, getting their stamina to come into play, and just staying on and powering home like that filly did. I mean, I was there in the paddock. She had the look of one that I think they knew that the distance was going to hit her right between the eyes, and I think they had the perfect game plan to get that done, and it was a very gutsy and impressive performance. What did the figure come back? Do you have that in front of you by chance?
I do. It was a 96. And the other thing I'll note, a fantastic ride for Javier Castellano, because aside from really doling out that speed, he cut the corner beautifully and I think really won the race at the top of the stretch.
Let me ask you something. Should I be kicking myself? I liked her on paper. I bet her a little bit, but I did not bet her hard. I just felt at the end of the day, against that field with all those other good fillies in it, I wasn't loving 6-1, so I sort of stuck a toe in the water instead of jumping in. Am I a wimp, or did I bet, or was my conservatism warranted there?
You know, I mean, it's easy to say after the fact when she wins, you know, relatively easily. But look, at 6-1 in a 7-horse field where you've got essentially 5 other fillies between 2-1 and 9-2, you know, 6-1 that's not a huge price on an relatively unproven, at least at that level, young filly against, you know, horses like Carolina, include Betty. I thought, you know, I liked her partly because a horse like Embellish the Lace I thought was going to muddy the pace and make a stronger pace than what we saw in the previous race where I'm a Chatterbox and Carolina were right there on the line. Didn't work out that way. But you got some good, I mean, you got the Kentucky Oaks winner in there. You've got, you know, and so I'm kind of with you. I mean, 6-1 was a little short.
Yeah, it was fair. I mean, that's like what I would have had around in my value line, being super aggressive. I might have put her at 6-1. I don't think she was an underlay. I just don't think she was the type of overlay to dive in head first. It's just one of those where afterwards, especially when you have the visceral excitement of being there and watching these fillies walk by in front of you, that afterwards you want to say, oh, I scored out on that, not, oh, I, you know, made enough to buy a couple of pizzas. And I was more in the I was more in the closer to being in the latter category than the former. One just paddock note I'll pass along was that I'm a chatterbox who was a lunatic on CCA Oaks Day, kicking the stall and just acting up, and I actually threw her out with impunity that day, thinking that meant she had no chance. Actually ran great. I do believe she had the racetrack with her on Oaks Day. I think that was a speed favoring surface, and I think that Carolina had to do her own dirty work, and that's why she showed so much speed. So when she came out and was calm this time, it didn't surprise me that she ran a lot more settled, and didn't surprise me that Embellish the Lace wasn't dealing with a maniac running head-and-head with her the whole time, which I do think would have changed that race appreciably. Those are the kind of things I like when you can be in the paddock for these good races, or be by the paddock as I was. I think I was in shorts. I would have been shot on sight had I tried to walk into the paddock. But where I was leaning over the rail with my beer, talking to my friends from L.A., Lower Albany, we were okay to get a good view of them walking out there on the track for the Alabama.
No, that's a really good point, and that's why it's incredibly useful and almost, I would say, essential to either do that when you're out the track, or at least follow along on the NYRA feed and just watch how horses are acting, especially if you've got notes about how they've acted in previous races. Incredibly useful. Yeah,
it's fun. I mean, some people find it distracting. It gets them off of what they do well, which is the paper, and it's a hard tool to implement into your game if you're not used to doing it. But I do encourage people that it is a way. I feel like you can maybe get a little bit of an edge just because there's not that many people doing it, and the people in the country betting the most money aren't doing it. So it's very hard to take on the biggest bettors in America at what they're doing and do it better, right? But maybe a tool like physical observations, or whether they come from the Clocker reports or an analyst you respect on television or Twitter, maybe that's a little bit of a way to try to work that club in your bag, as it were, and get a little bit of an edge. It's not an easy thing to just throw on a switch and be able to do that meaningfully. Like a lot of new handicapping tools, you might have a bit of a learning curve where you take a step backward in truth before you take steps forward, because it's always hard to assimilate new data into your work. But I do encourage people. I do think it gives a great perspective, and I also just think it's super fun. There's something really fun, and you see these beautiful animals within feet of you walking by at a place like Saratoga, and it's just, you know what, even if I have a losing day, it's like at the end of the day, I wasn't just staring at my computer and paper punching numbers in. I was within feet from some of the most beautiful creatures on earth. I don't know. There's like a little bit of emotional value to it too, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I love it. I love it. And that's really what got me started on being a horse racing fan initially, is just going those trips to Saratoga and hanging out near the paddock and watching all of that up close. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Real quick, before we move on from the Alabama, I will get back to the notion of value in Embellish the Lace. She was the fifth choice in the wagering of the race, and I would imagine that translated to additional value in the multis, because I'm guessing that a lot of players in a 7-horse field didn't necessarily go 5 deep. And so even though she was 6-1, I got to imagine that played a little higher in the multis.
I think that brings up another good point about a topic that I've been meaning to talk about on here for a while. I don't think we can do it fully today, but it has to do with tote board reading. Yeah. And I think you make a good point, because a lot of times, as much as inside information exists in the game, and it does exist, it can be wrong extremely often, but as much as it exists and is valuable, people who saw that filly work and really knew that she wanted 10 furlongs or whatever it was, the people who made her 6-1, that kind of money, that, I use this term with air quotes, but I do use the term, that type of smart money typically will choose to bet in the win pool. Because if you really believe you have inside information, why are you going to mess around? Right. So I do think sometimes those, sort of, again, air quotes, quote unquote, hot horses, because this stuff used in the wrong hands or used too wantonly, I mean, it'll make you poor, believe me. But if there is a horse where there's some reason why they're going to like what they're doing today, and they're a little bit bet in the win pool, I mean, this is a perfect example. that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be bet the same in the multis. So
Right.
this was an excellent horse to attempt to get alive to in the multis, and I did, but I did not have Chuck Lawrence's perfect title in the previous race. So my pick 4 had gone kaput. I loved Shake of Shakes. Shake of Shakes was a good looks play from the paddock. I had like a $10 A line, through the horse that ran second to perfect title that I did not use. From the way that you reacted, I'm horrified to think that you're going to tell me that you played perfect title.
I didn't. No, I didn't. It was
that
another
was just
day.
Empathy.
Yes, it was just empathy. It was just sad empathy. The one other thing, that's a good transition to something else I think we want to talk about. But before we move on, I want to say one other thing about value in live money and multis. And it's last year, the debut of Lady Eli, where I was alive to her in the pick 3. I ended up getting lucky in that when the first click in a 12-horse field, I think she opened at 3-5, maybe floated up at 3-2, but was absolutely bet like a sure thing. I was alive to her in the multis. She wasn't even the lowest paying pick 3. She was like the second or third.
Example.
And that's where, of course I wasn't the smart money there. I just happened to luck into the horse that was obviously went on to become a monster. But I think that would be a fantastic topic for a webinar, because I think a lot of users might have questions, and it's something we should definitely talk more about in the podcast. But
yeah, reading the tote. I had said before that I had a hard out in a few minutes. We can run a little bit over if you want. We could probably try to get this to an hour if you think it's necessary. I don't want you to feel rushed in your hosting duties in the last few minutes. I have a ton of work today, but I'm just enjoying our conversation way too much.
Good.
But with that in mind, it is true that people, again, it's not like a horse like Embellish the Lace wasn't played in the other pools, but I don't know. I gotta believe that you'll just see these examples where you can kind of tell by looking at the multi-race wagers which horses are going to be undervalued in there, perhaps. Perhaps if the same jockey or trainer has multiple horses in a sequence, especially in a double, you'll see those combinations be overlaid. And similarly, some of these sort of more difficult to imagine horses, whether that's because, not that Embellish the Lace was difficult to imagine, but like you said, 5th choice in the betting, and probably, what do you suppose she was on the morning line? Do you remember?
I think it was about 10, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So if you see a horse that you like that has a morning line that you think is maybe a little overinflated for whatever reason, maybe that 10-1 is a good thing to try to get alive to in a bet like the pick 3. Maybe that's even a single in the last leg if you believe that horse is going to be shorter. I mean, there was the example earlier in the meet, and I'm spacing on the name and I feel terrible. It was a very long race, and a Graham Motion horse won, who was 10-1 on the morning line, ends up opening up and going off at 9-5 or 2-1. Another example, if you can sort of look at your multis ahead of time and say, okay, here's a horse I really like. I don't believe the morning line is necessarily right, but maybe I can try to lock in something a little bit closer to that morning line price, or at least a little bit overlaid in a bet like the pick 3 or the pick 4. It's an interesting thing that you could use TicketMaker to help you get that nailed down maybe a little bit and try to get yourself just a little bit extra value in a multi-race sequence.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's funny you mentioned TicketMaker, because the other thing I want to mention today, and it's the perfect time to do so, is we have a webinar on Friday. You, me, and Mr. Jonathan Kinchin will be using TicketMaker to attack the Travers Day Pick 4. So not only can you get... What's that?
I can't wait. That's going to be awesome.
I know. So not only do you get Jonathan's opinion on how he's going to play the Pick 4 on Saturday, but you can ask whatever questions you want, and you can just see how to use TicketMaker. It's a fantastic tool that obviously has helped Jonathan make a lot of money. So I'm excited for that.
Absolutely, that's going to be fun. No, he uses it a little bit differently, so it's going to be fun to have all 3 of us going back and forth. He's such an aggressive player by nature. especially in a bet like the pick 4. He's not trying to have it for 50 cents. He's trying to, maybe have a backup for 50 cents, maybe, but, have his A line really come in and hit that pretty strong while not cutting off his nose to spite his face. So he's got an interesting approach. I have a TicketMaker story, actually, that I'm going to relay that I was very proud of this. Sometimes, in truth, it led to my biggest hit of the summer, even though I didn't handicap a single race. And I'll tell you how it went down. I have a friend who decided to do a little syndicate with his racetrack going buddies at this meet for the pick 5. So not every day, but every day he likes the pick 5. He's been playing the pick 5. And through the first, 20 days of the meet, he probably played it 15 times and probably had hit it once for, a decent, smallish score. And then maybe of the other 14 times had 4 or 5, 10 times. And so I asked him to take a look at the tickets he was writing. And, they weren't pure caveman. He was doing some iterations and backups and things like that, just sort of intuitively. But I could tell from talking to him about what his opinions were in these races that there was some inefficiency in the tickets he was writing. He was vaguely familiar with TicketMaker, but he never really sat down and used it. So he came over on, I guess it was Friday morning, and we sat down at the kitchen table here in the little house on the east side and went through the card, went through his opinions, and I helped him via TicketMaker to put together a ticket. Sharp guy that he is, he saw some things right away that he didn't like. In this case, it was a very smart adjustment he made where he thought that the C lines were too expensive. So he went back and sort of created a second backup ticket where he used those C horses only with his A+ horses.
Oh,
in other words, he created like a separate line, which I thought was really, really brilliant. Long story short, or long story slightly shorter, he goes ahead and brings the thing down for 7,000, and I got a nice little tip for my TicketMaker services because he says he wouldn't have played the combination in question had we not sat down and done the TicketMaker exercise. So
bravo, I love it.
A cool example of how it can help. So I think we've created at least one fan for life. Hopefully we'll get him watching the webinar on Friday. We'll get a bunch of other people. Folks have been asking me a lot about it because I think they're just realizing how hard it is to win without writing efficient bets, especially when it comes to pick 4, pick 5, pick 6. And as those bets gain in popularity, the necessity of people learning about this just becomes more and more. And then there's also, one thing we don't talk about enough about TicketMaker is the convenience of it when it's combined with the DRF Bets platform, because it's tedious. A bet like the pick 5, you might spit out, 25 tickets that you're going to play? I mean, even the pick 4, you can spit out, depending on what combinations you have. And yes, you can certainly get out a piece of graph paper or whatever and write down all 25 tickets and then go to, random ADW or walk up to the window at Saratoga and call those bets. The teller's going to really love you if you call out those 25 bets. That you really have to tip. You really have to tip if you do that.
Or the guy behind you if you're at the machine.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other story. I wouldn't even try to put complicated bets in on the machines up here. But all right, so that's the one way of doing it. Or you can just use TicketMaker, have a DRF Bets account, and then at the end, click the button that says "Play these tickets now" or whatever it says, and you do it in one click. And you're done.
Yep.
And it's amazing. It saves so much time. People talk with their ADWs about rewards programs and this and that. Well, that stuff's great, but you don't underestimate the value of an ADW platform saving you time, because as we all know, time is money.
Well, and it can potentially save you money because there's human error involved in punching in 10, 25 different tickets, and you might want the 5, but you hit the 3 by mistake. That happens. I've done it.
Yeah, you have to proofread it.
Right.
Yeah, you absolutely have to proofread if you're going to do it that other way, because that stuff happens all the time. Now, granted, on DRF Bets, you can hit the wrong button too, but the way that it presents on the screen at the end, it's way easier to proofread the whole thing in seconds instead of going back through your pile of tickets and it's really it's an amazing advantage, and anybody with the DRF bets access should probably consider putting in those complicated multi-bets on there.
Yep, I'm with you 100%. So that's Friday at noon Eastern time. You and I will both tweet out reminder links to that. I'm excited about that. Before we switch out for the day, let's get back to something that happened yesterday. It's been the talk of Twitter, or at least the horse racing Twitter that I'm mostly following. You know, I fortunately don't see much about Donald Trump and other things trending on Twitter. But of course, I'm talking about the debut of Jess's Dream. It looked for most of the race like you probably wouldn't even pass a single horse. And then top of the stretch, unleashes a furious run, gets up, wins by a length, earns a 90 buyer for that debut, and makes her his broodmare, Rachel Alexandra, now 2 for 2 in as a producer. What'd you think? You were probably there, and I'm sure you have a story around it.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And unfortunately, it's not the good kind of story.
Oh, no, Pete.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's bad. Before I get into my personal story, I'm just going to give what I think is my objective take on the race. First of all, I mean, you live to be 100 and never see something quite like that again. With a horse, so far out of touch, it looked to be in danger of being pulled up. 20 lengths, I would call it. I was sitting in the grandstand with the binoculars. I don't know what the official margin was at the furthest point back.
I think it was 18, but yeah.
18 was the official margin. Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable. That's reasonable. I trust the actual chart call over my own chart calling abilities. But, I mean, it was like nothing I've ever seen. And the horse, I'm sorry, the horse got it set up. There's no doubt about it to me that the horse got it set up.
Yeah,
fair. But he didn't have to win. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to show that class first time out. I thought it was an extraordinary performance, and frankly, when you look back at this meet, that'll be one of the things people talk about. It was awesome. So let me just get that on the record before I switch a little more into Debbie Downer mode and say, simply based on, my own observations and the fact that this horse debuted at 1 mile and an eighth, unusual distance, didn't have anywhere near the speed to keep up with this field. Granted, they were going fast. Is this a special racehorse? I would take the under. I think this was a great moment. This is a situation where, much like American Pharoah coming to Saratoga, I would be thrilled to have this horse go on to be terrific and make me look like a cynical jerk. I'm happy to play that role. But I think the next time he appears, I will be betting against with both fists. And just to explain what I mean is, just speed is just too important of a weapon. And I don't know, maybe somebody could take the counter argument that he could become a little bit more tactical in time. But I just feel like to debut a horse with that kind of speed in the pedigree, going that long, I think it might have just been one of those days where everything lined up. But the horse came home fast. The horse showed class. If they carded a lot more longer races, maybe that would help. We'll see. Please tell me, before I get into my personal story, I hope you disagree and thought it was just awesome and the horse is going to be special, so we can banter about it a little bit.
Well, I disagree a little bit, if only from the standpoint of, and I actually tweeted this out, I caution anybody to make too swift a judgment about a horse's running style after only one race. Because... And you can't really see it. I mean, obviously you saw it in person, but on the replay, I actually timed it. You see the horse for all of maybe 15 seconds. And then there's the whole backstretch where not only is he not on the screen, but the chicklet isn't even on the screen. And there were reports...
I thought the Trackus thing dropped out of the saddle towel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and there were reports of the horse running greenly until somebody tweeted out an ISO view of just him running. You can't really even see that.
Where did they get that?
I don't know.
Where did they get the Zapruder film of just him running?
I mean...
I want to see that, man.
If this were any other horse, you probably wouldn't see it, but because it was Rachel and Curlin's baby debuting, somebody was taking camera of just him running the whole way, and he was, I'll have to say, he was a little bit green, in his first start. He could very well, certainly became professional at the top of the lane, and I wouldn't be surprised if after this he ends up running a little bit more professionally, if he ends up running with a little bit more early speed in the future. I mean, I might want 2, 3, 4 more races to decide whether this is a stone closer or not. So that's the only thing I would say along those lines. But you're right. If that is his style, those kinds of races, it's hard to win that. You have to be a super horse. You have to be a Zenyatta in order to win those kinds of races.
And how about that irony? How about that irony of the speedy Dam dropping the foal with her biggest rival, though they never met on the track, of course, but her biggest rival, taking the wrong running style. It's a little bit of child rebellion or something going on here. It's another just bizarre footnote to the whole thing.
Right, absolutely. And before we get to your personal story, so I think I know where you're going to go, because it sounds like you're taking the alternate, more cautionary tale or cautionary view of the debut. But where, if you're Kieran McLaughlin in Stone Street Stable, you couldn't ask for a better debut, at least in terms of the second half of it, and in terms of the finish position, and probably I wouldn't think there's any reason why he wouldn't step forward in the second start. Where do you go next? Do you go straight into stakes, or do you go through the conditions? Yeah,
you absolutely run this horse. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Run this horse through conditions, because I mean, obviously, again, just the way the horse has been handled, there's questions, and again, as visually awesome as the debut was, there are still questions about really what exact kind of racehorse this guy's going to turn into. So why not wait a month and find a first level allowance at Belmont? Maybe going 1 1/8 again. And see where you are. I mean, believe me, as a cynical jerk of a bettor, I'd love the horse to pop into a stakes race. Then it could really bet against with both fists in all likelihood. But I think they're going to be patient. Everything they've done with the horse shows patience. As impressive as the horse was, I don't think. I mean, these are smart people who understand that the horse clearly has some issues to work out in terms of the speed, just needing speed, needing to be able to stay in touch with the field. I mean, seriously, if there had been in-running betting on this race as there is in the UK, this horse would have been 100-1 during the running of the race. You just, that's not reliable. Right. And I get it if you want to say, because he didn't break well, because he was green, give him time, he's going to develop, he's going to stay in touch, and he's going to keep that kick. Maybe you're right. But where's he more likely to develop? By going to the Wolves in a stakes race, or by running through conditions at Belmont? I think it's a no-brainer.
I think you're right. It would be a little interesting to see them take a shot, but I think you're right. I'll also note the great call from Larry Colmus. People are talking about the finish of it, but for me, the most noteworthy part about it was on the back stretch when I was thinking, okay, this horse might get pulled up. He's lost so much touch with the field. Yet Larry Colmus is saying, and Jess's Dream hasn't unleashed his run yet. And I thought,
right,
wow,
that's a great point.
That is a very, very ambitious and optimistic view that Mr. Colmus is taking here.
That's amazing. I wonder if that's one that he had planned. I mean, that's a great question to ask him. Hey, did you really see that he might uncork something, or were you being nice? If I see him in the press box, maybe I'll ask him that. I thought he did a great job on that call. It was very exciting and fun, and I'm sure he had that line prepared, but it came off as if it was impromptu, and that's all you can ask, right?
Right, absolutely.
What was it? Jess's Dream is a reality? Was that the one? Very good.
Yes, I think so.
Much nicer than my horrible line, which I issued on Twitter, that I'll give at the end of this little story. So I told you about my Saturday getting poked in the eye. I got a double poke in the eye on Sunday where I was alive in the last race in the pick 4 to get out on the meet to 6 horses, only to get pipped when my horse drifted out in the stretch, allowing that first time starter at 25 to 1 to get up, which ended up being a double whammy of trouble. One, I didn't have for a penny in the pick 4. And again, people, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm unlucky, I'm unlucky. I went back and I looked, and it would have cost me a whopping $18 to just buy that last race in some iteration, rather than being vulnerable to the 3 long shots. You know, maybe that's my fault that was the kind of race, if you're ever going to buy a race, that's the kind of race you could buy, given the class level, given the fact that it was a sprint. So, you know, I blame myself. But not only did I not cash the pick 4, but because that long shot won, it generated a big pick 6 carryover, which got me somewhat thickly involved yesterday.
Right.
And I'll admit, I thought in addition to the $400,000 carryover being part of the reason to play, I thought part of the reason to play was to oppose Jess's Dream. I just thought it was such a strange spot. First time, 1 1/8 miles. There was sort of conflicting information about how the horse was working out there. But I just figured this is the kind of horse. It's funny, I said before about how there are certain like wise guy horses, smart money horses, that money will show up in the win pool and not the multis. Jess's Dream's actually it's sort of the opposite of that. A horse that's going to have so much fan money that while he was hammered in the win pool, he probably paid better in the multis, because the wise guys playing the multis are probably, a lot of them are thinking that same way of let's beat this horse. But still, even if the horse was 6 to 1 in the multis, I just thought it was a horse to take a shot against. So was involved once again more in the construction end of a ticket than the handicapping end of a ticket, where my main opinion was, hey, let's play this to beat this horse. As you can probably imagine, the other 5 legs all came in. And so at the end of the day, I have to look up at the tote board and see 18,000 and know that the reason this wasn't hit was that I decided to take on the foal of 2 of the best and fastest horses I've ever seen run in person. So that's how smart I am, folks.
Pete.
And then the Twitter line was, for me, Jess's Dream was a nightmare from which I'm trying to awake.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, that's rough. I mean, I think you're absolutely right in terms of the dumb money showing up in the win pool, because I think for much of the betting, I think he might have floated up to 7 to 2 or something like that, but for much of the betting, he was 2 to 1, and I think he was even favored for a little bit of it.
Yeah, though they came for the horse, and people were excited. They were the grandstand. I was in the grandstand for the race. People were rocking. They were rolling. They wanted to see it. It was a great story. I can't blame them. It just wasn't. It just wasn't any good for me personally, and I don't really regret the ticket construction. It's just sort of cruel and ironic and funny all at the same time when you realize, you know, if you'd come up with some way if you could have constructed a backup and spent a couple more dollars, you know, you could hit for 18,000, but you know, you got to be too much of a wise guy, and Jess's Dream ended up eating my lunch. So it happens. Right.
Yeah. It's tough. Yeah. It's one of those cases where, you know, you might want to have an opinion, but don't want to be so stubborn as to you know, cut off your nose to spite your face is, I guess, the term that they use. But
yeah, I mean, I could have had a backup going, but I did. But to be fair, and to not be total hindsight 2020 about it, I did think it was part of the reason to take a shot at the thing in the first place.
That's fair.
But of course, and the other irony is my darn horse doesn't drift out on Sunday night. Then the pick 6 doesn't carry it. I'm out on the meet, and I go to the pool. I go to the pool yesterday instead of dealing with the pick 6. So that's life, though. Sometimes, at least the Mets are winning.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Even when they're giving up 7 runs. And their starter doesn't make
I know,
it
my man didn't look so good last night, but I thought I'd support him by wearing the shirt today.
Right.
You got a couple more things before we get out of here?
I was just going to mention other dumb money. You know, Jess's Dream's aunt, I guess you could say, Samantha Nicole ran yesterday, and that was a horse that I think was taking a little bit of too much money in the win pool, and I think maybe she ran fourth. But then the other big example that I used earlier in the year, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, was Zenyatta's baby's Cosmic One. When he debuted, they were giving away posters. They were giving away posters of this horse who had never even run yet. And he opened up, I think, odds on, floated up maybe to 8-5. But that I tweeted that out. If betting 101, if they're giving away posters about a horse, especially if he's never run before, he's going to be overbet.
A fair point, and that may be the case when we see Jess's Dream next at this point. Saratoga legend, Jess's Dream.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, it's been a fun one today. I know we wanted to keep it short, but we had a lot to talk about, so I'm glad we were able to go off on a couple different tangents.
If you see anybody over there in editorial and they're wondering why my piece is late today, Mike, you take the blame. Do that for me, okay?
I will.
Too much fun talking.
I'll fall on that grenade for you, Pete. All right. Well, thank you, sir. And we will talk multiple times on Friday. We'll do another podcast. We'll have our webinar with Kinshin. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure we'll talk before then.
Let me ask you one thing before can I send it away after I ask you this one question? Also, we covered everything?
Please do, yes.
But the question is, did we actually get through a whole podcast without a technical difficulty today?
Yes, we did. Makes me feel.
Last time I said it at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. You set it up. It makes me feel good for the future.
I jinxed us last time. I got such a hard time from that from multiple people. They were dying laughing. Multiple people said to me, as soon as you said that, it started getting fuzzy again.
Yeah,
so I wasn't going to make the mistake. Yeah, I mushed it, exactly. I mushed it like Santa Anita mushed Cosmic One. I mushed the last podcast. But all right, Mike, I look forward to talking to you on Friday. Maybe we'll get Kinshin to guest on the pod as well if we can figure out that technology. And until then, may you win all your photos.